Hello everyone, Justin with Deep Dive Stocks here, and today we are going to be looking at Microsoft. Now, Microsoft has been in the news recently. For those of us joining from the future, Microsoft recently had an announcement regarding its new chatbot, ChatGBT, on February 7th, 2023. So I thought this would be a good time to see how the market was prepared for the announcement and how the market has responded to the announcement now that a few days have passed. In this video, we're going to focus on VoEx and the gamma hedging environment to get a feel for how VoEx's stability may lend itself to either longer-term stability and price appreciation, or too much instability with this recent price movement, and ultimately more downside. So let's go ahead and get started. To get started, I thought it would be interesting to look at VoEx and what it was telling us about Microsoft before the announcement on February 7th, 2023. VoEx is a metric designed to allow us to visually visualize a stock's stability or instability. If VoEx is new to you or you're not that familiar with it, no worries. I'll put some links to some videos in the descriptions below, and I recommend you go watch them. I think VoEx is pretty cool. The main benefit that VoEx provides us is that a stable stock will typically appreciate in value over time, whereas an unstable stock will, as the name may imply, drop, or at least not appreciate over time. So it can be quite beneficial to be able to identify if a stock is stable or unstable. So let's start our journey by looking at VoEx from February 6th, 2023, the day before Microsoft's big announcement. And here, there are several things that I would like to point out. The first is that VoEx fell into the propagation zone on January 1st, 2022, and has predominantly resided there until just recently. Since falling into the propagation zone in January, it met an immediate 14% decline before VoEx even began to move out of the propagation zone. However, we do see that this movement out of the propagation zone wasn't one that was indicative of stability. For instance, we see that there are several instances where Microsoft was in an overall decline in price, but experienced about a few weeks of a rapid price appreciation, and we see that this rapid price appreciation was met with some pretty substantial VoEx responses. The first was in mid-March of 2022 until the start of about April of 2022. The second was in mid-August of 2022. And this is behavior that is pretty common for a stock whose stability is located on the downside. So up until about August of 2022, we see that VoEx fell into the propagation zone, indicating persistent and continued decline in price was the most reasonable outcome. And then anytime that Microsoft tried to change that price trend or move against it, VoEx immediately sent up the signal flares that that price appreciation was provoking substantial instability, which ultimately would lead to the downside, which it did. However, VoEx is also suggesting that this might be changing. Notice that in December of 2022, Microsoft also began experiencing a price appreciation, and VoEx did not respond as it typically does in the prior episodes. Namely, it didn't have a VoEx spike up towards the inhibition zone, do a whole bunch of spiky nonsense, and then attempt to spike down back into the propagation zone. So although VoEx's movements into the or out of the propagation zone in December of 2022 are pretty aggressive, we see that the morphology of VoEx moving out of the propagation zone indicates a lessening level of instability with this price appreciation. Even more recently, we see that the most recent price appreciation starting in January of 2023 was also met with a pretty aggressive movement out of the inhibition zone, but over a much larger time frame than what has previously been experienced on Microsoft. So overall, if we look at the price behavior from November of 2022 and compare it to all of the price appreciation events prior, this looks like Microsoft is obtaining some level of stability. At least the market is becoming okay, some air quotes there, with VoEx or with Microsoft moving in a positive direction. Now, VoEx isn't quite as calm and relaxed as we would like it to see, but this is a pretty common sight for a stock that is finally regaining stability after almost 2 years of being in an unstable state. Also, this might be a good time to point out my video on Microsoft that I did, where I highlighted how unstable Microsoft was, and since then the price has dropped pretty drastically. So, whereas this isn't a full bullish endorsement for Microsoft leading into the announcement, it does tell us that Microsoft is becoming more okay with a price appreciation event, like something that might happen during a live announcement. Now that we've seen what VoEx had to say, let's shift over to the hedging heat map and the gamma hedging environment that Microsoft was in prior to the announcement. The gamma hedging heat map allows us to visualize when options dealers have to purchase shares or sell shares. When a stock moves into the blue zone, that means that as the price or volatility moves, options dealers have to purchase shares. If a stock moves into the red zone, that means that the options dealers have to sell shares. We see that the hedging environment on Microsoft was still pretty unstable walking into the announcement, with significant selling pressure located in the bottom right, indicating that if Microsoft experienced a drop in its price and an increase in its volatility, options dealers would have to sell shares into that declining price, which is obviously not a good thing. We see that Microsoft was in a very tenuous space located almost near gamma neutrality, but with some significant selling pressure located just below it. So, how did Microsoft navigate this hedging environment? Well, it played some parkour. Let's take a look. We see that in starting in the pre-market, that Microsoft ping-ponged its way to the gamma neutral zone and then right up it, ending the day substantially higher than it started. Although this behavior may seem paradoxical at first, such that Microsoft did experience selling pressure from the options dealers, yet the price continued to rise, it does show us that someone was absorbing the selling pressure from those options dealers, and on top of that, still purchasing more shares to raise the price. So, in other words, this does suggest that there may be a naturally forming or organic bid on Microsoft that was sufficiently large to overtake the options dealers selling shares and continue to propel the stock upwards. One of the places that we can look to see if there is a forming organic bid or natural buying power from retail investors or large institutions on Microsoft is the dark pool. And we can visualize that here. Here we see a graph of the dark pool purchasing. The higher the value, the more purchasing that is occurring inside of the dark pools. Typically, large institutions go to the dark pool in order to fulfill large orders that they have without disrupting the lit market, and this process is assisted by the market makers. So when we see large purchasing or a large ratio of purchasing in the dark pool, it typically represents that a large or larger institutions are purchasing Microsoft in large lots or a lot of quantity of lots. And in this graph, we see that that is recently exactly the case. The green dots represent any purchasing above 50%, so anytime that purchasing is more than selling within the dark pool, and that singular gold dot is a pretty staggering 60+% purchasing within the dark pool. So we can see that there was and is quite a forming base of organic retail interest on Microsoft, and that provided the ample purchasing power required to overcome the selling pressure that was being provided by the options dealers. It sounds complicated, but what does this all mean? Well, it means that people are interested in buying Microsoft, and not only people, but larger institutions as they start turning towards the market makers in the dark pool to satisfy their larger orders. So we see that between VoEx indicating a forming base of stability and a return of retail interest, then Microsoft, leading up to its announcement, was setting the stage for long-term appreciation. And the question is, has this persisted now that the announcement is complete? Let's go ahead and take a look. Moving back to VoEx, this is VoEx for Microsoft from the February 10th, 2023. And we see that VoEx has predominantly not changed. And this is actually pretty good. And a stock that is returning to its stability, you typically don't want erratic behaviors either in the price, in VoEx, the hedging environment, or what have you. So when a large announcement, such as the announcement of a new chatbot, doesn't disrupt the foundations that are forming, the foundations of stability, I should say, that is typically a good sign. Here we don't see any VoEx spikes. We don't see VoEx moving into the inhibition zone or falling down into the propagation zone. It's essentially just hanging out inside of the stable zone, which is exactly what we would like to see on a stable stock. Moving towards the more near-term hedging requirements, we see that things have also changed here. Whereas before we had selling pressure located in the lower right or in the spot down volatility up quadrant, we see now we have abundant purchasing support. So should this new stability give way a little bit and the price appreciation overheat somewhat, we see that should Microsoft in consequence fall, the options dealers will come in provide purchasing support to the market and help propel Microsoft, or at least cushion its fall, which is supportive of a longer term price appreciatory outlook. And in fact, this is the exact type of heat map that you want to see in a stock that you can start forming some confidence that it will have a more medium to long term price appreciation. And then lastly, moving towards the most recent dark pool prints, we see that some of the institutional dark pool buying has died down somewhat, but not substantially, with the most recent print at 49%, so almost an even split between purchasing and selling. And in comparison to historic dark pool prints, this is still one of the larger and more sustained bull activity in the dark pool that Microsoft has really seen in the past 2 years. So overall, what did we uncover? Well, we started out by looking at how Microsoft was doing prior to its announcement, and we saw that VoEx was indicating that stability was returning, but there was some near-term threat from the local hedging environment. However, throughout the announcement and afterwards, we see that the selling pressure provided by that hedging environment was overcome by organic retail interest, and that organic retail interest is reflected in the dark pool behavior. And then after the announcement, well, we see that things are much the same. For a stock that is regaining its stability, we like to see that in VoEx. We like to see that it is not overly reactive, either producing VoEx spikes, moving aggressively into the inhibition zone or into the propagation zone. So that is a sign that the returning stability on Microsoft is real, and it is here. And we see with the hedging environment that things have actually stabilized quite a bit. With some substantial purchasing support located spot down, volatility up, we know that should the price appreciation or should this new stability found on Microsoft give way a little bit, we can have confidence that the options dealers will come in, provide purchasing support, and hopefully help keep Microsoft afloat while the organic bid and the organic interest for Microsoft come back to it. Although I don't think that they're going to be very far, because it seems that they are quite aggressively moving towards Microsoft right now. So, but that's all I have for Microsoft for you guys. I think that it's always been quite an unstable stock. Truthfully, definitely I recommend checking out the video where I compared its stability with that of Tesla, and it was found that Tesla was actually substantially more unstable than Microsoft was, and we can see the results. I mean, Microsoft has basically been a dead fish for the past 2 years. But finally, I think we are starting to see the stability return, the interest return, and on the heels of a potentially groundbreaking new chatbot, things are looking pretty exciting for Microsoft, and it will definitely be worth keeping an eye out for. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed. And if you guys like this type of data, do the thing, like, subscribe, let me know. Leave some comments if you think that Microsoft is going to go up over the next few months or down. I'm interested in hearing your opinions. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time, and happy trading. Bye.